Hello, this is my John Deere 2025R. This is I believe a 2021 model. So the year 1921, but obviously a model 2025R. So those unfamiliar, this is the next step larger than the very, very famous 1025R. It's kind of the Swiss Army knife of compact tractors, and this is that same exact machine, but on a small dosage of steroids. So I had picked this up just over a year ago, about a year and a couple days, a couple weeks, and I had picked it up with, I believe, 140 hours, and now we're just under 240 hours. So we've clocked 100 hours in it, and it's done a whole lot of work for us. We've used it to mow this whole mowed section of grass. It used to be crazy tall weeds because we're in November, so obviously a lot of this is already matted down for the season. But it used to be crazy tall. All the grass on this humongous hill, and it is humongous. If we put this level at the tractor, it freaking swallows it whole. Mowed all of that. We've cleared out almost all the brush, managed to put it into some neat, tidy piles that I can't zoom in on because of my phone. And then we've managed to clear down a few fallen trees as they occur. But I gotta say, I haven't been able to keep up with them. This year it's just been so wet of a summer and so hot. Whenever I'm able to come out and try to tackle things like that one fallen tree you see, that's a big one. About 100-ish feet long it was. Now it's more like 50, 60. It's just been way too wet or so dang hot that you wouldn't want to be exerting yourself, and with it being so dang wet, all that becomes soup over there. Anyhow, so this has been quite the magical tool for us. And it's been doing more than just the normal property maintenance. So we've been using it to move snow all of last year quite successfully. We've also used it to do a lot of landscaping with the bucket. We'll talk a little bit more about some of that stuff later. And we've been using it for a lot of general construction, but my car and motorcycle stuff. My passion is motorcycle restoration and my cars in particular. But we live in Wisconsin, so we have winter for a good 3 to 6 months of the year. It varies. We haven't had a serious winter in a few years. It makes me worried about the upcoming ones, whether they stay tame and dormant like this or they really kick our butts. Anywho, we use this a lot for moving around, like all my car parts and motorcycle parts, as well as entire motorcycles themselves. That was kind of the whole thought behind getting this guy. Now, we had moved out to this property shortly before we bought this. But we had bought this property a year and a half ago. Took a lot of renovations to get the house to a livable condition, and it's still not technically there. However, we are living in there with minimal compromise, and that's a very good start. But when we moved out here, it's a good chunk of land. We're just under 6 acres. About 1/3 of it is on this hill. 1/3 of it is out front, what would be considered swamp, what was previously farmland. And the other third is this, which the same thing as out front. Previously farmland, left unused. They were growing wheat and barley and just normal hay until they stopped. And then water, ways were not controlled. Turned into a soup fest. But now that we're just keeping the grass at bay, things are becoming much more tamed. But out front, it's way wetter. I have to use this guy to define a creek. That way we can kind of dry out the land and make it less swampy. So we're slowly working on that. Again, with how wet it's been this year, it's just been a struggle. So when we got this property, it's on a very steep hill. You'll be able to see it here. You know, if these are the vertical trees against the straight part of my finger, you know, this gets pretty steep. And I'm not even perfectly aligned with some of this stuff. Like it gets drastic about halfway up this hill where some of the dead grass is. If that really says something, that's literally how steep it is. So, my old mowers, they are little Ford LGTs. They're awesome for what they are, but they're only 2-wheel drive, and they're older. Parts availability for them is becoming quite hard. Luckily, most of their parts are generic fit, you know, like an old tractor would be. But any other specialized stuff is really hard to get a hold of, and with them being so old, parts fail regularly. Especially when you haven't, you know, restored it. Once you restore them, okay, you know, you're good for good 10 to 20 years. But if you haven't restored them, well, you're kind of screwed. So, you know, getting parts was a big priority. But back to the property, we needed to have something that had 4-wheel drive just for when I mow. And my driveway is just as bad as this back hill here. So I needed something with 4x4 just to move snow. And my little garden tractors, they just weren't going to cut it. They could barely mow up the hills. So as soon as I found that out, I thought, well, crap, you know, we're going to be making an investment. Well, I happen to work at a John Deere dealer, and that grants me a small discount on parts. But more importantly, working with them, I've learned kind of the ins and outs of the John Deere system. They carry parts for almost all their tractors, for almost every inch of their tractors, for a good 20 plus years. So this guy, I'll be able to get parts for a very long time, especially since most of it is compatible with the 1025R. But these are so dang robust, it's rare that they need anything serious. Now, with that being said, when you neglect them, abuse them, issues will arise, because you can see it's just not all that big of a tractor. And there are plenty of plastics. There are plenty of low-duty things. And again, like I said, size-wise, these are only 48 inches wide from the factory, so they can sit side by side on a semi-trailer as they get to the dealers. So there's things like that to keep in mind. So I started looking for tractors, and it didn't necessarily have to be John Deere. I was considering everything: Bobcats, Kubotas, Mahindras, New Hollands, etc. But the parts availability being my main quota on the checklist kind of narrowed what I could do. I know the Bobcats are, you know, Bobcat subcompact tractors, pardon me, are basically Mahindras, if I got that right. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. But the dealers for those are quite limited. The good news is, since the Bobcats are just rebadged to other tractors, parts availability helps. But there's so few dealers for either, and me getting any kind of service or parts for it would be extremely hard, let alone me buying it in the first place. We're in a kind of remote corner of Wisconsin. And as I say this, I pause the video because I hear I think an Amazon truck or something backing up to the house. Maybe it was just UPS. So you can tell by my voice, it's usually very quiet here, and then all of a sudden, backup beeper. Yeah, there goes Amazon. So, normally it's real quiet out here. We're in a very quiet corner of Wisconsin, not too far from the Mississippi, and as a result, very hilly, occasionally wet. Pine trees love this crap. But there's a good string of John Deere dealers, well, everywhere around here. Everywhere. You can see this tractor had come from Kibble Equipment over in Minnesota. and I had brought it across the river and in and around the state. But yeah, there's John Deere dealers everywhere around here. There's one every 20 to 45 minutes here in Wisconsin, or at least on the western and southwestern half of things. So getting parts wasn't going to be an issue at all. Now, there's an equally high concentration of Kubota dealers out there. And I have no beef with Kubota, or Ford for that matter. My family used to have a Kubota, that they still have it actually, of this size, but it's old. It's old, and I think it's actually slightly smaller even. But it's older. It's from the late 70s, early 80s, I think. Like a smaller B series, I believe. But it's manual transmission. I think 3 ranges and 3 gears. And it's quite the unit. It's a literal tractor, but it's so dang small. It does a lot for what it is. It would be great for garden work. Like I saw it back when I was living with them, plenty of among neighbors who had these just awesome gardens out on the flats, and then chicken coops to tend to, smaller chicken coops, and they were perfect for that stuff because you could hook it up. Ours had a belly mower, ran off the rear PTO. You'd mow with it. You put a brush cutter on the back if you had to. You got a box blade for landscaping, from bucket for landscaping, and then rear tiller for most of your gardening needs. Very handy for that kind of work. But it was so small. The front end loader that was on it was actually a John Deere aftermarket John Deere loader for something much smaller, for like one of their 400 series garden tractors. But the bucket was way. The bucket itself was overbuilt for the rest of the tractor, and the loader was underbuilt for what you could do with the bucket. So it all equated to just this dangerous nuisance as soon as you introduce any kind of hills, assuming you're trying to do any work with the front loader. Take the loader off, it's a fabulous machine. But knowing that knowledge, I really want something more modern, and I wanted something that I could change attachments with easier. Those LGTs that I talk about, like I said, they're awesome. They're great. I like them a lot. However, changing out each of their attachments, even just on a garden tractor, was a royal pain in the butt. I shouldn't have to disconnect the mower from 2 points, undo a belt, and then once I've dropped it down, turn the wheels all the way to left or right, get down on my hands and knees and drag that sucker out. I hate that. And with the snowblower, you really need 2 people. You need someone up front rocking it forward and back, because it's got this lawn draft link attaches to the mower lift points. And then someone has to be on or next to the tractor, slowly pushing it into your blower, and while steering. It really sucked. It sucked. I mean, the stuff worked great, but if you're a one-man crew like myself, it really sucks. So I wanted something that would streamline things, and that kind of made the race between one of these John Deere subcompacts or the Kubota subcompacts. More modern, of course. So I did my due diligence, and I went to both flavors of dealers. So I went to the John Deere dealer, I worked at them, and then I went over to the Kubota dealer, a very, very short distance away, and I tried out a couple of each. And I was able to make a lot of quick differences, some of them small, some of them more substantial. At the end of the day, I decided I wanted to be team green. The Kubotas, I like them. I don't have much beef with them, but there were a few complaints. The controls out front, they're not very well color coded like the John Deere ones are. Everything orange is something to do with your movement. Everything yellow is something to do with PTO. You can see the orange colorings. Orange is all range, RPM, brakes, and yellow is strictly PTO. That's great stuff. And then anything black is quasi adjustable as you see fit. So on the Kubota, almost everything was black. There might have been a red knob or two. And that doesn't bug me at all. But I do a lot of work with friends and family as I need help and as they need help. This is the machine that comes out and lends a hand for others as well. And just that little thing alone allows any fool to hop on this and become a tractor god within 20-40 minutes of operation. But they can hop on it, drive it, do any operation just like that as soon as they walk up to it, turn the key. The Kubota things were a little bit less intuitive. And then a lot of the controls felt awfully cheap and flimsy. And that really says something, because a bunch of these John Deere controls do feel a little cheap and flimsy. I mean, granted, the throttle arm and the joystick are nice, tight, bulky, very firm, heavy duty. But the 3-point controller, metal stick with a plastic knob, all along it, only plastic channel. Same thing said for the gear shift and the PTO selector. Even plastic steering wheel, plastic parking brake, plastic cruise control, but metal pedals at least. Metal diff lock at least, and 4-wheel drive activation. But the Kubotas just felt very cheap. And the seats I could never jive with. They were way too firm, way too thin, which did not help the firmness. But these John Deere seats, they're very, very plush. Like a new motorcycle. It's pretty nice. But you can see I have mine under wraps. But underneath this very affordable cover that manages to keep the rain off just dandy and keep sticks and stones from leaving marks. This is still the premium leather, vinyl, whatever, molded, padded seat, and it's fantastic. But I chatted with the Kubota dealers, and something I had noticed online was a lot of the Kubotas for sale, the modern BXs, I think is the current Kubota subcompact, slightly smaller than this, and they do have one this same size as well. Was a lot of them on like Craigslist and Marketplace have blown engines. Thought, well, what the heck's wrong with that? Kubota makes fine stuff. Our old Kubota is still ticking. It's got so many hours, it's due for a rebuild even. So we're actually doing that as we speak. But I get to the dealer, and salesman made it very adamant. Because on the Kubotas there is a screen in the back, very common across multiple different tractors. I believe the New Hollands are the same. But there's a mesh screen in the back, like how my Deere has one up front. And that mesh screen that's in the back by your operating feet, that's actually your intake charge. So all the air for the engine intake, and then all the air for the radiator, it comes through that, and then your exhaust goes out the front. But on here it's flipped around. All of your intake is up front, and your exhaust comes out the side, and whatever excess heat comes out the sides and the rear portions of the hood panels. But he said that there is a serviceable screen in there that you need to be checking frequently and then remove and clean regularly. I said, well, that doesn't surprise me. I know even these have it. But he said, yeah, well, it's something we got to mention because people with just muddy boots, they'll fill it up quickly. And then it needs to be cleaned pronto, or you will overheat the engine and find yourself without an engine. And then I was able to realize, oh yeah, that would probably do it. That would be why there are so many used new Kubotas for sale that have crap engines. There we go. So here's said removable screen on mine. Every so often, just side it up, knock it out, clean it out, blow it out, whatever you need to do to keep your radiator from clogging up. And then same thing as you mow through the thick stuff. See crap accumulate on the mesh screen. Just have to keep it clean and tidy. But on the Kubota, all of that is in the rear. And that's not a problem, but what does happen is people will forget to tend to that service, and then you'll have, nasty consequences because of that. But a guy like me, I'm pretty on top of things. It's not an issue. But however, what did bother me was on that Kubota, our old Kubota, it's laid out the same way as this. Your whole engine and accessories are in the front, same for your battery, fuel tank in the rear. But on newer Kubotas, the engine is literally flipped backwards. So your radiator fan is back here, and there's a drive shaft that goes from the crankshaft all the way to the back of the transaxle, like it is on this. But I believe the flywheel side is what's up front. And since the fan is over here, you actually have a fan belt going around your drive shaft to your fan itself, your water pump. If new Kubotas even have water pumps. I know the older ones don't. Mine doesn't. Thermal transmission, whatever you want to call it. But so anywho, if your radiator fan belt needs replacing, you're looking at partially removing the engine, or some way, somehow removing that drive shaft. And that seems like a lot of work when I plan on owning it for a long time. I will be doing that at least 3 times during my ownership of the tractor. And that bothers me. So between that and the very cheap operating station, and admittedly poorly laid out, I wasn't too keen on it. And then one of the final straws was when he said, now, are you thinking about getting a backhoe or not? I said, well, I don't know. I don't have a urgent need for one. I don't know if I'll ever need one, but it could happen. I don't know. He's like, well, it's something you'll need to make sure you decide on before you buy one of these, because he says there is a backhoe edition and there is a standard version. And he showed me them side by side. The backhoe version of the Kubota BX, whatever, has an extra frame that is incorporated into the standard frame, goes all the way around the footwells, around the back fenders, to the back where you would then mount up your backhoe. The John Deeres don't have this. For the John Deere, everything is already incorporated. They're all backhoe friendly. You just have to remove all of your 3-point arms, and they're all just on quick pins is all. Remove all of your arms, links, whatever you want to call them, and then you back into your backhoe. You slowly lift and lower your stabilizer arms on the backhoe, and then you're locked into place. Set a couple pins so it don't pop out, and boom, done. Conversion complete. That bothered me too. I don't know if I'll need a backhoe, but if I do, if I get the wrong Kubota, I won't be able to get it. And that's a big deal. With most of the used units out there, my budget isn't new. My budget is used. Most of the used Kubotas out there, most of them don't have backhoes. So if I ever want to maybe have one, I needed a different tractor. That's a problem. We're trying to condense here. We don't want to have a tractor for mowing, a tractor for blowing, a tractor for hydraulics, a tractor for loaders, yada, yada, yada. No, I need one. My property is small enough to justify one Swiss Army knife, even if there's minor compromises here and there. So, said forget it with the Kubota, and we just stuck with Team Green. New Hollands, they don't exist around here. They've kind of given up on the subcompact platform out here. I think they just couldn't compete with Team Orange and Green. Another thing was the trundle pedal, whatever you want to call that. My garden tractors all have that, and I don't have any issues. However, my wife does have issues. She's got very short feet and very short legs with not a whole lot of muscle on them. Now she has an issue because, like on my garden tractors, you stop with your heel down on the reverse pedal, whereas both of these are up front. The reverse pedal would be in the back. Stop down on with your heel, you go backwards. She struggles with that, and if I'm spending this kind of money, it needs to be on a tractor that she can hop on and use, which she does with this quite frequently. For every every hour that I'm on this tractor, she's on it for about 20 to 30 minutes herself. So we do both put this through a lot of paces, and it sees a lot of different operators on occasion. But being these were checking boxes for her, it worked out just dandy. Now, some of you are probably started typing in the comments, well, why did you get this over the 1025R? There's a substantial price difference, and why did you get this when you could have just done the 2032 and the 2038Rs? There's a few reasons for both of those. So let's talk about the bigger machines first. Okay, with the bigger machines, the attachments for all of this and the starting price, all those prices are just substantially more. They're ridiculously high compared to what these are. We're talking 50 to 100% more. That's just a whole lot of money for equipment that on paper does about the same. Sure, yes, of course, the 2032 and the 2038 stuff is going to be a little bit more rugged and robust. I'm not doing rugged and robust. I said I only got 6 acres. I don't have 40, you know. The other thing is a physical size. You see over here I got quite the collection of larger trees, but then in other parts of the property I have collections of smaller trees that I have to, 1, mow around, 2, fit between. So there were a few concessions as far as those go. And then finally, on these smaller ones, the attachments change out much easier. Changing out the deck on a 2032, 2038, you know, the bigger twos, is technically the same as it is on this, but a front snowblower, much harder to do. And the deck is slightly harder to do, slightly harder to line up even, and if you don't perfectly line up, hopping off and giving it a couple gentle kicks or a wiggle of the arms to get the locking pins in their final place, it's a little less possible. But then it was after I started driving each of them, pretending as if I was mowing them at the dealership. I found out that these little guys, they mow much better in my tight quarters. Yeah, you can't see it on the rest of my property, but there are some spots around the house, because it's up on a hill, where I have to have a pretty tight turning circle, so I'm not doing a 50-point turn. If I got the bigger 2 series or anything larger than that, there'd be a few things on here. One, the bigger decks would be scalping some of the more complex curves of my property, and then also in any tight corners, they would be doing multi-part turns and still missing a lot of places that need mowing. Ergo, if I had a bigger 2 series or a 3 or 4 series, I would still need a push mower for a lot of that stuff. That wasn't the point. I'm trying to get away from multiple pieces of equipment. I'm trying to get one with low maintenance attachments. By low maintenance attachments, I mean I can take the blade off, put it somewhere else, not worry about it. I can take the snowblower off, grease the chain every once in a while, change the gearbox oil, and away we go. With the loader, I can take it off, park it any time, grease up all my fittings, cover up my hydraulic fittings, and now it's stored away for whatever time I need. It's those things that really matter. So it was clear that it really should be one of the small 2 series or the 1 series. So then the next thing was, how steep all these hills are, which tractor is the least tippy. I tried them all. I tried the 3 series, the large 2s, the little 2s, and the 1s. The 1s were the least tippy. From what I can tell, they are so low to the ground that you're you will likely slide well before you roll the thing. This guy, it's a similar story, but it is higher off the ground. So this will roll before a 1025R, but it's still going to slide first. Within reason. We'll talk about that soon. But the bigger 2s and the 3s, those are some tippy mamma jammas. Now granted, they do have wider wheelbases, wider track, whatever you want to call it. But the weight is so much higher, and the operator is so much higher. They just feel more tippy. They feel so much worse than all these other tractors. And then even on this guy, there's a substantial difference in how much it leans and crap as I'm mowing ditches like this. Just depending on whether the ROPS are up or down. If I have the ROPS down, it feels like I can squeeze another 2 or 3 degrees of slope out of this guy before I start having issues. Whereas when they're up, it rocks much more. That's got to be like 30, 40 pounds. An additional 3 feet up in the air, maybe 2 feet when we're doing averages. And that's not helping the cause. But it's ironic because with that up, you're more likely to roll, but more likely to survive. But with it down, you're less likely to roll, but less likely to survive. It's a real contemplation. But I found the small 2 are acceptable as far as hill tippiness goes. And I figured I could improve it later if I really want with some wheel spacers. So we did. We'll talk about those later. So after having tried each, weighed the pros and cons of each, a few things came to mind. And here is that list of how I determined which one I liked more, the 2025R or the 1025R. Well, if you have a 1025R, it weighs in at about 1450 pounds, so 1450 pounds. This guy weighs in at 1870 pounds. So out of the gate, this thing weighs 400 pounds more. And that's before you put in liquid ballast. Since the 2025R has much bigger tires, front and back, you can fit a lot more ballast in these. Something to the tune of like, it's 200 or 300 more pounds in the rear than what the 1025R can have. That has a substantial difference on your traction and your rollover and your ride. The heavier you make these things, the less lumpy bumpy it is as you're driving around, because it's squishing the ground more, even when it's frozen. So next, 1025 is higher off of the ground. And this is the one thing that you'll see online everywhere. Oh, the 25R is just a 1025R with bigger tires. That's not entirely the case. Yes, the tires are substantially larger. But that also means that it's higher off the ground. And the wheelbase front to back is longer. This is the same width as a 1025R, but the wheelbase is much longer. If you had a 2025R, this view right here won't look similar to you at all. Normally the screen mast would be almost touching the screen platform. But that right there is roughly 6 or 7 inches extra front to back that the 2025R gets you. That is a substantial difference. It's huge. There's a few reasons why. We'll get to those. But despite the longer, front to back wheelbase, this has actually darn near the same exact turning radius as the 1025. This one is only like 2 inches wider, turning radius. That's awesome. This thing turns really tight, even after I put spacers on it. It's pretty good. but the transmission is geared the same. So a 2025 is faster. It's going to perform faster work than a 1025. The rear 3 points are identical. The difference is with the 2025, they're mounted lower. Otherwise your usable range would be all messed up. So they're otherwise identical. The 2025 also has a taller seat because, yeah, for one, the frame is higher off the ground, but the seat itself is slightly higher, off of the platform in respective comparison. And with how far forward the loader mass are, I almost never hit my knees or anything mounting this guy. I can get up just like this, and we're up and on the machine. But if I was on a 1025 right here, my knee would be smashing into the freaking loader mast all the time. Literally every 1025 that I step on, I'm mashing my knees into the dang loader mast, and there's nothing I can do about it. Sure, I can mount with the opposite leg, but now I'm really cramped for space in here. This is the same operator footprint for me on the 2025 as it is on the 10. And it's still cramped. You can barely squeeze through here, even if you click the wheel up into the highest position. You barely sneak on in there, and that's if you have the wheel all the way to the back. So that is a huge freaking improvement. And then there's some mechanical advantages with that we'll talk about. Now the performance specs, aside from like I said, the wheel speed is greater on this. The performance specs are the same. The engine is rated at the same horsepower. The hydraulics, however, if we're talking before this year they took all of the 1s and little 2s across the board, and they made all of their hydraulic systems the same. But up until 2025, each of these had a different flow ratings for hydraulic systems. So the hydro pump on the 2025R was bigger than that the 1025R had, and that one was bigger than what the 1023E had. So each step up, you got more and more flow. Now it's not a huge difference, I will grant that. A lot of people online will say, yeah, it's not worth taking the 1, and if you have one of the small 1s and turn it into the small 2 pump, you're not really going to gain anything. There's some truth to that. Your gains won't be awesome, but they will be noticeable. With the 2025R pump, it's got so much volume, and it's not just pressure. It's got the volume. The pumps are physically different, all 3 of them. You have so much more volume, you can actually operate 2 functions at once on the loader. I know with the 1025Rs, if you put it, full wide open throttle and try doing 2 functions at once, it just won't. Do it with this, it will. You will do 2 functions at once, even down at idle. That's a big difference. Now, we'll go back to the high ground clearance. There's a few benefits with this. For one thing, with this being higher off the ground, the engine is sucking in a lot less dust. The sucker is, a good three or so inches further off the ground, which means you're that far higher above the dust. And that's not just for your tractor, that's for you. You are up and out of the dust, and that's a big thing when you're mowing, like these big dry fields in sandy lower Wisconsin. Another thing is when you have the deck off, you're having less issues with the mid-mount mower deck. With the mid-mount mower, if you opt to leave all the stuff on when you take the mower deck off, which you can and you should, it's John Deere had designed these to be that way, so you choose. If you leave all this on the 2025R, all this stuff sits a few inches higher, so it's less prone to, say, catching stumps on your bracket hangers or your drive shaft coupler, or wrapping your drive shaft itself in weeds. And on the same token, your front axle drive shaft is less apt to clog with weeds and crap as well. That's all very good stuff. And on top of that, the deck itself will lift about 1.5 inches higher than it does on the 1025R. So if you have a 2025R, you're able to have a little bit more versatility in your mowing. In addition to that, being that the wheels are about 6 inches further forward on this than the ones, the drive over auto connect deck is much easier to mount on this. And that really says something, because on the 1 Series, they're very easy to mount up. When everything is adjusted right and you don't have any damages, things line up quick, so lickety frickin' split. Excuse me. Mounting a deck on a 1 Series is a matter of only, 20 to 60 seconds, depending on how quick you can get on and off the machine. Look down and confirm that each of your pins are correctly located. On this guy, you will shave 20 seconds off your time just to start with, because aligning it is so much easier. You have so much space between the back and front wheels that your window for error is much larger when you're hooking up the deck. It's so much easier. And again, the ones ain't bad. They're amazing. But this is even better. It's just what's so cool. Keeping with some of the mechanical characteristics, this does share half of every attachment with a 1025R. That means that the loader is the same, the bucket is the same. The loader mass are very similar. The only difference is this outer piece. Because on the 2025R, they have this bumper extension up front. They have the front axle, I think it's in a comparative space with the 1025. But the biggest thing is height, because this tractor is 3 inches higher than the 1025R. This side mass piece mounts lower the loader, so that it's at a comparable height to the 1025, which has its belt sitting lower. So there's that. But all the other attachments are the same way. Your snowblower is going to be the same everywhere except for longer drive shaft and slightly different mounting carriers up front. The mower, exactly the same, except for slightly different mounting hangers up front and a different rear main hanger. Same with all the other underbelly and front attachments. So that makes them, one, very easy to find. So easy to find. If you're like me and your tractor came bare, you can go out and collect any of these attachments quite affordable, because they swap over from the 1025s. You can get a loader or a mower deck or a snowblower pretty cheap, all things considered. And all you have to do to put on your 2025R is spend a little bit of money on brackets. So what you can, because the 1025s are everywhere. They flood the markets. They're all over Facebook. They're all over Craigslist. Everybody has one. They're everywhere. Because of that, all their accessories are just crazy cheap, and the units themselves are crazy cheap by and large. All things considered. But because of that, there's not much demand, which helps the used market. So you can usually get 1025 accessories quite affordably. Which means when you want to mount them on your 2025R, oh crap, you can get a loader at a great price, spend a couple $100 in the correct hangers, boom, done. It's on, it's working for way less than it would cost you to go to the dealer. You can find low hours used attachments everywhere quite affordably. Yeah, and even new, still the costs are low. Like I said, with the large 2 Series, everything about those is just substantially more than any of these. It's just wacky. So that is spectacular. But it kind of concludes the 1R versus 2R thing. there are a couple minor differences, like the operator station is more or less the same. These controls are laid out a little differently and they operate a little differently because of how the cab is extended on this guy. There, the high-low range gear selector has a few linkages instead of just direct to the shaft. So in my complaint section, that's one that does get a little sloppy, and keeping it lubed up regularly helps so much. But it's not foolproof like the 1025. That one works like a motorcycle shifter on a sports bike. This one works like the shifter on a cruiser bike. As time goes on, it just gets sloppy. There's nothing you can do about it. Even from out of the gate, there is a little bit of slop there, but it's nothing terrible. It just slows you down that extra second when you're trying to sneak her into a gear. Have to do the dance because it's hydraulic or hydrostatic. So any hydrostatic tractor, you do the little pedal dance and play around with the brakes, creeping back and forth, and go click into gear just dandy. It's not a big thing. It does add seconds. But overall, yeah, I think that does cover all the 1 series versus 2 series stuff. One thing I do want to point out that these older ones had right, the parking brake. I love this. This is genius, okay? Now, granted, so how this works is you push on the parking brake, the brake pedal. You push on that. You pull this up, and now your parking brake's on. To disengage, push this down, push this down. Your parking brake is now disengaged. Works great. Now, they did go at some point, I think 2023? I think it was 23. They went and they put in a actual ratcheting, handbrake down over there. And yes, those do work slightly. Well, they feel better. The problem is, John Deere had made them wrong. They made all of them wrong. So they're supposed to have like a round arch, and there's a number of serrated teeth. Well, the bottom couple are all shaped wrong. They're all cut wrong on every single one of these, and only some of the 2025 years that I've ran across aren't like this. But almost all of them are shaped wrong. So as you're putting the parking brake down, you have to rapidly press the button and shake it, hope you make it all the way down to the bottom. Otherwise, you're not fully disengaging the thing. You'll see the parking brake on light as soon as you turn on the key. It's so frustrating with those because on the earlier ones, when they first started doing this, it was many notches at the bottom. So your brake would actually be partially engaged while it's trapped towards the bottom. But they've since fixed a couple of the teeth on the newer ones. So you only get it stuck in a non-usable range, but it's still stuck there at the bottom. They finally fixed that again, so that it doesn't hardly get jammed up at all anymore, at least on the new ones. So now let's talk about some of my attachments here. A bucket was a must. For actually not much dirt that I move, but more so I could have pallet forks. So on this guy, I picked up the Frontier AP10Fs. They are the light-duty Frontier forks. They're 42 inches long. They work perfect. So one thing that I love about the 2025Rs, it puts your operator view so high up, you can actually see straight down the sides of the hood. The two both sit down in the seat. Now you can see as I lean left and right, you can, if I tilt this forward, there we go. You can see the hooks, for the bucket attachments, and the pegs with their pins down below. And this is, we're zooming in for you, but this is at head level how I'm able to see all this. So I'm able to swap out attachments quite easily from this vantage point. This really is just fabulous. Zero complaints here. And even my shorter wife The seat moves around a bunch for her, and she can reach all the pedals and all the other hand controls ever. Very so comfy. And she can usually see most of this down here for, you know, changing out front end loader attachments. But with this, you can also see the tips of the forks quite well. If you can imagine seeing just a couple feet beyond the bucket, that's out perfect. So I got the AP10Fs for this, and love them. They work amazing. They're rated for like 1,200 pounds, the tines are, which is more than I could ever put to them, which means in theory, I should never be able to break them. That's a great thing. The loader itself, I got this tractor used, like I said, and it came with this 120R MSL, SLM, oh, yes, it is the MSL, mechanical self-leveling version of the 1025R loader. For those of you in other countries, this may be a more common sight. Here in America, this is extremely rare. The reason being because, well, there are pros and cons to it. One of the pros is it's self-leveling. As you raise it up and down, whatever you have up front stays perfectly level. One disclaimer, we'll talk about that later, secret special feature. But one of the cons is it doesn't lift as high. For some reason, these hydraulic cylinders, they didn't make the main body a little bit longer. And that's all it would have taken, is if they made the main body 1 or 2 inch longer. The geometry for sure allows for 1 extra inch of longer lift. It would be able to lift higher. But as it sits, this does lift 1 inch lower than the non-self-leveling. So there's that in mind. Additionally, this adds a bunch of weight. So if you have concerns about front axle sturdiness when you're picking up a lot of weight, this loader itself, I think, can pick up 50 pounds more than the normal one, just not as high. So if you're putting this to the max, you're putting even more strain on the axle than you would be the normal loader, because this one just weighs more by default. That is something to keep in mind. But that's kind of about it. I love it. It works great. And then something I had found out, that it's not very well described or demonstrated in videos. But like in the Tractor Time with Tim video, you can see him do a side-by-side of this one and the normal 120R. And as you go up with this, if you have it like dumped down all the way and you're raising it, things will bind. It won't let you go up anymore because you've bound up the self-leveling portion of the loader. So it won't physically go up anymore if you've max curled down. But in the real world, that's pretty unrealistic. It's not too often you would be max curled down and going up at the same time. But what is more likely is you being level or curled back while you're going up. Happens all the time. Everybody does it. You're supposed to. And then when you reach the top, as you curl down, the geometry is such. This is what's really hard to show and describe in videos. But as this reaches the top, once it's at full height or near full height, we're talking like between 1-2 inches of full height, if you curl down the bucket some, it just dumps. And that is awesome. So literally as this thing goes up, you can have it level like this. And then once you reach the top, you simply curl it a little and it dumps like almost all the way. And then as you go down, it'll reset to about half. And then you continue doing whatever you were doing. It's spectacular. It's amazing. It's really hard to explain. And I know it might not sound make sense talking about it, but it works quite well. It's something you can witness. It's pretty awesome. Now, naysayers are going to say, well, that means you're going to just dump whatever's on your forks. well, if you're being a maniac, sure. but We're talking some serious tilt. Because keep this in mind. This is with the bucket. With the bucket, you're by default are already curled a little bit. When you have pallet forks, these are curled back a little bit less. So when you have pallet forks at the max height, you have to tilt them down much further than you would this before you get the auto dump. So you have to move the stick forward, or I think to the right. You have to move the stick twice as long for it to do the same thing with pallet forks. Okay, that's what we're talking about. So normally, if you're using pallet forks, you're not going to be doing that. You'll be doing fine little adjustments. That's fair and square, perfectly reasonable. Those won't cause you any issues whatsoever. It's when you go to dump, you will dump. And as you lower back down, it will kind of level back out. Amazing. That is some awesome geometry. And I'm sure they did that because, with the non-self leveler, for you to kind of level it by hand as it goes up, you're using 2 hydraulics at once. And then same thing going back down, you're using 2 hydraulics at once. Well, if it can mechanically do half of that for you, then you can work the loader technically faster. So that's the truth. If you go and use this loader, even with just the bucket, but for the forks for sure, and even the bucket, using just the bucket, you will feel like you're moving, a good 15 to 20% faster than with a normal non-self leveling loader, because you're able to go in, pick your scoop, tilt back just a little, go up all the way, tilt out just a little, it dumps, and then as you start lowering it down, it evens out, and then you're ready to go and dig another scoop. It's spectacular. It works so nice, especially on the 2025R, or if you have one of the brand new 1 or 2 series. You just have quicker and stronger hydraulics out of the gate. It's awesome. There's, considering that, it kind of washes away with a couple downsides. Now, some people will complain that it doesn't curl back as far. Fair enough. Realistically, I haven't had any serious issues with this. The only issues I've had with not curling back enough is when I'm loaded up full of loose scrap like sticks or logs, and I'm driving downhill like a fool. You shouldn't be pointing downhill with your bucket full. You should always be pointed uphill whenever your bucket is full. Do that, nothing will fall out, tractor won't tip, yada, yada, yada. So, yeah, I haven't had any kind of issues with that. I don't foresee it happening. But in the event that I need to move a buttload of dirt up and down the hill, people have made spacers to go between the front mass and the bucket itself. Shims it out by like 2 inches, and that makes it perfectly the same as the non-self leveler. And people love that. I'll try it if I need it. For now, I got 0 complaints. I'm just going to be real. So that's kind of the loader in the nutshell. You can see on the back I do have a box blade. When I first got this, I didn't have any rear attachment. It just came with the quick hitch. And I had borrowed my dad's 60-inch rear turned rear drag blade, simple drag blade. Works great in the for snow, and it does move a little bit of dirt. But this moves dirt even better. But we'll see this year. I got a feeling it won't do as good with the snow, because you can see the rear is really meant to be like a dovetail cleanup that also doubles as a bulldozer blade, whereas the front one is purely a chisel blade. It's meant to remove the surface, not excess, but the surface. And with how my driveway is, we've been able to make it nice and smooth with this. But still, there are some minor undulations and a crown to it. So I'm hoping this doesn't remove too much of my driveway when I try using it for snow. Obviously, we'll flip these tines upside down so they're not causing any ruckus. Otherwise, as far as moving dirt goes, you put them in the smallest hole and they don't touch any of your dirt. It's great. Quite fond of it. One thing with it being a limited Category 1 3-point is that this is as high as it lifts up. So when you're going over undulations, and we're talking the same thing with the 1 Series, your rear attachment can often dig into the dirt unintentionally as you're backing into stuff or traversing your property. So it is on my bucket list to get a top tilt, because I got this dialed in pretty good, so that right here at max height, it is tilted forward some, but when I drop it down, it's pretty close to level. If there were multiple holes for the top link, it wouldn't be a problem, because then at max height I could have it, real aggressive, but then as I lower it down, it gets perfectly perpendicular to or level to the ground, however you want to see it. And so it's one of my few complaints. I do have the 60-inch mower for this guy. Amazing, especially you put the load and go brackets on there. Oh my god, that's amazing, because it's like a 300-pound deck. Even with my LGTs, it's a much lighter deck, but one guy bending over to pick it up and move it, it sucks. There's no reason why drive over decks couldn't exist then, when they exist now with less components than the standard ones did back then. What the heck? Now that you can just pick it up and park it anywhere you want with the loader? Whoa! You can store it vertically somewhere, drain the liquid out of it, store it vertically all winter. Fill it back up full of fluid in the spring, sharpen the blades, away you go. It's amazing. It's so cool. But yeah, it's just awesome. I love all the ergonomics. The armrests on these guys are adjustable. There's a little thumb screw underneath each. And fold them up out of your way, there's a screw. For the most part, I have them down. And whether you're short arms or long arms, they're kind of the perfect levels for joystick action. And pretty well in line with the steering wheel. All the side controls are pretty accessible. And what I love over the older 2025Rs, a lot of people rip on these. They're like, well, they can't move as much and they're not as strong, stout, dependable as the older ones. Well, the older ones, the fuel fills freaking in the middle of the hood. I hate that. I can't freaking stand that. Excuse me. All of our tractors, up until this one, have all been hood-mounted fuel tanks. Every single one. From our garden tractors all the way to our big, we'll say, orchard-sized tractors that I have some pretty good experience with. They all have a hood-mounted tank, which means, oh great, we'll get up on the running board, just get a wheel on the tire. I'm holding this 5-gallon tank of diesel that I'm trying to pour in there, and then watch the level it's going up and down. And oh great, older tractor, the mast is in the way, so I'm kind of balancing, or I'm way up here leaning over the thing, I'm getting all greasy, I'm making a mess with the fuel. It's cold out, I want to go in, my hands are cramping, I can't see what level I'm filling up. Versus this, you grab your jug, you take the lid off, you walk over, undo the cap, set jug up here, then simply with 2 hands, one hand up top, one hand just making sure your nozzle doesn't slide in too far, you start pouring. It's like filling up a freaking car. It's amazing. There's no reason why all tractors couldn't be like this. Tank in the fenders. Duh. Why? Why did it take decades, centuries for this to come around? It could have just been here the whole time. Look at this. Fuel tank, belly button. Any fool can do this. And if you have a 1 Series, it's even better, because this is even lower. It's amazing. Why could we ever have like that? Like I said, the mower is great. It moves a lot of product. It cuts real nice and clean and level, assuming you have everything adjusted correctly. That part's key. If you're crap at adjusting, you're going to have a crap mow. And it mows pretty quiet, all things considered. My garden tractors are not so quiet. And then before we talk about our final mods, let's talk about a couple of complaints. There's really just a few. The 3-point sway limiters, quite a pain in the butt. Now, from the factory, they work just fine, but the keeper that they have to keep it from spinning is just a key ring. So trying to undo that so that you can adjust these is a real pain in the butt. The easiest thing to do instead is undo one of your hitch pins and then manually thread only one end in or out until you get your desired amount of sway, and then call her good. But I prefer doing this. Put a hitch pin in the hole where your key ring was, and away you go. But there is a genetic flaw with these. The holes that these go into are pretty big. But you can see that the bolt threads that come out of it are pretty small. Well, there's a problem. When John Deere made these, they didn't quite do it perfect. The threaded portion that sticks out, if we pretend this is the main shoulder that is healthy diameter, sees most of the load, and the threaded portion that comes sticking out of it is so much smaller. The problem is the smaller portion only barely comes out of those holes. So it's essentially what happens, because the thick portion doesn't come all the way past the hole. It stops right in line with the outside here. So the thick portion only comes up to here where the tip of my finger is, which means from here on out it's just the threads. And how you assemble this is the nut bottoms out. So then as time goes on, this piece right here from the upper lift link slowly guillotines off the freaking bolt. It slowly shears it off. Kid you not. Very, very, very common problem. So what I do is I go in there where it's nice and thick, cut off some of that, and I weld in a nice thick bolt that goes the whole distance. And I don't have it mounted on this because I'm waiting for this one to break, and then I'll do the same. But when this dies, I have a set of modified ones ready to go. They'll be much hardier, I should say. A lot of people will complain about the front mount toolbox. Okay, fair enough. I actually don't have too many issues with it. However, there is one thing. It only opens worth a darn if you have the handle pointed forward. If you have the handle pointed back, it's not going to open really at all because it just starts touching the grill piece. When you have that down, it opens all the way. Because of that complaint, John Deere had relocated it on the new ones. So for the model year 25 and newer, you'll find the toolbox back here, just like the ROPS sign. Next big one is the ROPS. Now, something you need to be careful with is if you're getting a 2025R instead of a 1 series, the ROPS are much taller because your tractor itself is higher off the ground. This guy is a little taller than 7 feet, which means it's not going to clear your garage door. So before you hit it, fold it down. The problem is, once you do that, you need to remember when you drive it out to flip it back up before you raise the 3-point. That's very critical. A lot of people end up bending the threaded portions of their adjustable top link because they had their ROPS down, forgot about it, lifted up, and boom. Whoops. So you can see someone before me had added a chunk of pool noodle so that, one, it doesn't scratch should that happen. It doesn't stop it from bending. But the second thing is you'll heal this before the metal actually starts bending. That's a clever thing. And the nice thing is, depending on your model year, some of these will actually have pinholes for you to have it back more at like a 90 degree or more vertical, or back at a 45. On this one, I don't. It depends on the model years alone. There's a lot of, they vary so much. But on mine, it leans forward by factory, and you can have it folded down all the way. There's a pinhole for that. Otherwise, if you pull out your main pin, you can set it in this top hole, and then that will rest on here. So then they're back at a permanent, 90 degrees. Now, with this in mind, it's not locked into place. It will still float up and down. But if you need a quick go underneath one of these short trees here like I do, you can quick fold it down, and then before you go back up the hill, fold it back up, and you can do all that without having any 3-point issues. Now, you had already heard me talk about the gear shift. Yeah, that's sadly just a small oversight. I wish it was more direct, but then the travel would just be ridiculous. So just try to go in there and lube up all the joints best you can every so often. Now, the step on the left is amazing. They're spring loaded, so if you're doing some real wacky stuff with the mower deck on, or climbing over stumps, whatever, it will spring up, come back down. But there isn't one on this side, and I don't know why. It's easy enough to mount from this side, at least on the 2025R. The only thing really obstructing you is just the pedals a little bit. Most people don't have clown shoes like me, and they can slip underneath them. And then the joystick lever, which, well, you bump, whoop-de-doo, you can actually even press a lockout, and now it don't move in any direction. So I think they were really missing out on that. But I've looked at the parts diagrams, and I've looked underneath mine. I think the issue is because there's no room for the bracketry with all these hydraulic hard lines that come through here. So if you were able to design around that, you could come up with something clever. My next complaint is no dual brakes. That's a bummer, but I honestly haven't needed them. I have 4-wheel drive and diff lock, and it turns on a dime no problem. Like I said, the turning circle is as small as the 2025R. Now, you don't need it smaller than that. If it gets any smaller than that, you'll be ripping up your yard in all 4 corners. That's what's going to happen. Service. Okay, there's one complaint with the service. Everything's quite easy except for the greasing. I've had to grease up the drive shaft for the 4-wheel drive, and then the drive shaft that goes from the engine to the transmission. Both of those really suck to do. In particularly the one from the engine to the tranny, it really sucks. There's a steel plate down in there that obscures the 1U joint, and there's a small itty bitty hole, kind of U-shaped like this, that you can kind of stick a grease gun nozzle into and feed it full of grease. Oh, it's hard. It's hard and it stinks, but you do it. Luckily, you only have to do it every so often. It's like every 50 hours, every 100 hours, something like that. R4 tires. That is my least favorite thing with this guy. Now, these are full of rim guard, as you can see, so they do great. I got some wick grip with these, and a lot of positive traction just from weight alone, and improved surface area over the 1025. These are going to grip much better. The problem with these, however, as tough as they are, they're crazy tough. Typical skid steer tire, you're really tough, but they were really only meant to be used on concrete and groomed gravel, relatively level gravel. Anyone who's serious with any kind of skid steers won't be using these anywhere outside of concrete or groomed gravel / driveway. That's just it. If you see any of these doing serious ditch work, they're going to have tracks or a different set of tires. I wish these had the, I think the R3s are the hybrids, where it's half turf, half aggressive, a very good in-betweener. Supposedly those do wear down very quickly on paved surfaces, unlike these. These are so dang hard, it takes forever to wear them down. But because of that, these shoulders are extremely aggressive. So as you're using it, if there's any kind of moisture in the dirt, you're going to be leaving marks with these. But with that in mind, if it's that wet out that you're leaving marks, you shouldn't be mowing where you're mowing in the first place. It's just something you have to understand. But because of the shape of these, if you're mowing along a trench side or ditch side, these will be very prone to sliding. It really sucks, especially on my place. I got undulations of every which way, and when I use it during the winter, I got snow everywhere. These are a total freaking slip and slide, and with how aggressive the shoulders are, they cut really hard. You'll left to right, forward to back, not so much. So you end up sliding a bunch, and then when you're finally slowly gripping to move forward, they just start tearing up everything. It's terrible. As soon as you get a little bit of moisture in your dirt, these just start ripping everything up. It's a total nightmare. Honestly, egg tires might have been an upgrade compared to these things. So if I had all the money in the world, we'd be getting those hybrid tires, even if they wear faster. I don't care. They'd be better in the dirt and the snow. And of course, these do nothing on ice. So that bitching and moaning aside. Exhaust. There's one quirk with the exhaust. These older ones, it just shoots forward, it leaves a massive cloud. Now I had put on an extension here, kind of downturns it a little bit ahead of the front axle, and then away from all this. You can see I got medium amounts of soot all over my kickstand and my loader and my bucket. I usually keep these pretty clean. I clean it off every couple months so that I can actually monitor issues. It's hard to see any kind of issues with your equipment when it's all black and sooty. So I try keeping it clean. But there is one serious downside. During the winter, I don't have a snowblower yet. That's in the to-do list. But during the winter, I remove snow with the bucket. With the bucket, it gets shot on by exhaust from this pipe because it just shoots forward. That's why all this is covered in black soot. It warms up the bucket in this corner. So as you're moving snow accumulates inside the bucket in this corner and will not leave. The other side, bucket will just slide right out because I keep this outside. The bucket's always the temperature of the weather. Ergo, snow doesn't stick to it. Until the tractor's been running for long enough, then this side of the bucket gets warm, snow fills on this side, doesn't get out, and now it's less effective at snow removal. It's just how it goes. So I had put a downturn on it, and the dang thing got loose, turned around, melted a hole in my plastics. God dang it! So that was a lesson in vigilance. And I had gone like 20, 30 hours without it moving a millimeter. And then one day I was mowing for a while, and then, I had no idea until I started smelling warm plastic, and I looked down and went, "Oh no!" That was about $360 in plastics I melted. So I know not to do that again. We'll come up with something different for this exhaust. Probably end up just taking it off, cutting it somewhere in here, having it point downwards. But the trick is I don't want it pointing down on the deck itself. It's going to get the deck filthy, heat up the belt and the spindles. I don't need that. I don't need the deck heating up either. Grass will stick to that. But I think my final complaint is fuel tank size. Fuel tank capacity is just over 5 gallons, something like 5.2. And that's great because you can go a long time. Depending on how I'm using this, I can go I can do about 8-ish hours of operation on one tank of gas, one tank of diesel. 5 gallons of diesel gets me roughly 8 hours of use, depending on whether I'm doing a lot of loader work, a lot of drag blade, or a lot of mowing. Mowing out of everything is the most efficient. I can go 3 hours and only burn a quarter to half, depending on how thick the crap is. The loader work, I'm using about 20% more fuel. With all those complaints tended to, let's talk about some of the mods we've done. So you've probably seen all of them, but there's a couple I haven't talked about. I did the wheel spacers. That made a huge difference. I had no idea the difference would be so big. Now, until then, I have been able to mow with this at like 30 degrees sideways along my ditch side out by the road, the ditch of the road, the embankment, 30 to 35 degrees, somewhere in there. I put on these wheel spacers. I think they're 2.5s, and with the 2.5-inch ones, I'm still able to clear my deck, but only just barely. If I lift the deck up all the way, if I hit a bump just right, it does clip my tires, so I have to be kind of vigilant when I'm using it. But that 2.5 inches adds up to 5 inches, so we put 5 inches on top of our 48 to start with, edge to edge. So we've made our track 11% wider. Pretty good. And I was able to catch these on sale. These are the exact same as the 3025Es, I think so. I'll try putting the correct info in the description, but because those sell so few, Borla and Brotec usually have them listed cheaper than the 2025R, which is the exact same. They spec'd out identical. So I went and bought them. That freaking fit like a freaking glove. Absolutely perfect. You wouldn't know that they were the wrong ones. So they're exact same. And I got them for like $140 less than they would otherwise. So I was ecstatic, and I love the difference. Like I said, it's roughly 11% wider. So now, sadly, I can't go 11% steeper, but it feels like it. Now, it sure feels like I can do 40 or so. It feels like I can do dang near 43 without tipping this thing over. So somewhere around 43 to 45, this guy does start sliding. But at least it'll slide before it tips because of these stupid skid steer tires. Now, because of that, whenever I'm using this in the mud, and I haven't used them in the snow yet, but I'm assuming when I use them in the slush, the mud does sling off the rears a little bit because they are now, sticking out 2.5 inches. So I picked up these fender extensions from John Deere. They were spendy, but I think they do the trick. As I hover over them here kind of in a fair manner, you can see that it obscures about half of the distance needed to cover. Now, if I had more time, more resources, I'd love to take these off, do some sort of mold with them, use them as just to get this body curve right, a compound mold to have even wider fender extensions that come all the way down and around. Oh, that would be awesome. But we'll see how it goes. These might be fully effective because these don't sling a lot of mud. And I've driven in a lot of crap. It doesn't sling a lot of mud just because you're not moving all that fast for the most part. Throw it in high, go down the driveway. Okay, now you're kicking crap up. Next, actually, one of the first things I did with this guy was the light guards. These are, if they're not genuine John Deere light guards, they're the exact replica knockoffs. They're fabulous. They keep you from busting your hazard lights, but they also give you a great place to mount pots. You can see here, I have them mounted up as such, so that when I turn around, each one lights up a good spot over here so I can see the edges of my blade, then over here so I can see anything that I'm mowing around, as well as the headlights. They glow up a good portion of what's in front of me, and then these two, the stock ones, will glow what's just in front of the deck. So mowing at night becomes possible, and rather therapeutic. And moving snow at night, or in the dark at least, isn't so much of a chore. I talked about the load and go brackets on my mower deck. We talked about the liquid ballast. Now, I had also made a front weight bracket on the bumper. The bumpers normally aren't all this tall, but I found some scrap steel, cut them up, put them on. The factory kind of bumper frame here fits 5 42-pound suitcases across, width-wise. And that is a must when you are moving snow with this guy, at least with the MSL. The extra weight you have up front is less weight that is on these steers when you're snow blowing in float, which is how you move snow with a loader. You put this thing in float. You putting it in float is taking a lot of weight off of the front axle, so you kind of lose your steering. You put 5 42-pound weights up front, you almost completely counteract this. Like I said, it's not completely counteracted, but it's mostly tended to. It's a substantial difference before and after. And now it does clear the toolbox just fine, but with the MSL, this joiner portion here across the frame is higher than the non-self-leveling loader. So I had to raise the weights this roughly 3 or 4 inches, and now it clears this fine. You can see where it had been scratching all 5 of the weights previously. It no longer does anymore. While we're up front, I say while we're up front, they're in the back, but I use a pair of edge tamers to move snow with this come winter time. They're little guys that clip on the front corners, the edges of your bucket. These little triangular skis or shoes, however you want to look at it, they just bolt on to the cutting edge, and they just work dandy. When I'm not using them, you can see I keep them in the back, keeps them out of the way, keeps them from getting lost, and it gives me, like 10 pounds of ballast. But they're cheap Chinese knockoffs. They work just fine though. I lubed them up so they don't rust, and they always the bolts always run in and out quite well. Up front, they came with a special chrome wrench. It's got the correct size wrench head on each side, and I keep it inside my front toolbox with a handful of adjustable wrenches, spare hydraulic caps and plugs, just little stuff like that in case I see something loose, need to snug it up. So I keep that up front. So then during the winter, as I'm using these guys, I very frequently take them off of the 3-point and just have them kind of up front, pending, ready to go, if I don't already have weights up front. So I got a lot of versatility as far as weight versus float goes. Yeah, that's about it. I absolutely love it. It's fabulous. It's made me more lazy of a person because well, almost every single job now we need to do that would require team lifting. It's like, okay, well, let's quick go grab the tractor, bring it around, we'll throw it on the forks. Or I made a homemade 3-point trailer mover hitch for it. So if we need to move our little 4x8 trailer, okay, we'll throw the hitch piece on the quick hitch, quick grab that, throw stuff in that, and we still have the bucket or the forks with the pallet up front. We can move a lot of crap. So yeah, this has become the Superman tractor. It's become the team lift machine. It's become everything I asked of it, and occasionally it surprises me and lends even more. Oh crap, I forgot to mention, I did weld on these bucket hooks. I know they're bolt-on units, but they're better welded. Bolting them on would be an exercise in futility because the metal of the bucket was not meant for that. But if you weld it to them, they're much stronger, especially in the far outermost corners. I did this back before I had picked up um, the forks, the pallet forks. Because with this, whatever funky load I may be carrying in the bucket, like a motorcycle frame or engine or something, I can just throw it in here, run a strap across it, hook to hook, loop to loop, whatever, and away we go. Same thing with some of the tree trunks. But since then, I've literally only used them once. I got the forks and they do dang near everything. I thought I'd really want to grapple. Haven't had to yet, but I don't quite have the quantity of brush to justify it. My piles of brush just aren't big enough. So we'll see where that takes us. We're still hoping to get a snowblower on this thing soon. But otherwise, how you see it is how it's going to be. There's not much on my to-do list for it. It's kind of got everything I want. Yeah. Aside from me getting rear tiller someday, I would like to get another normal drag blade on this guy for snow. But otherwise, it's been fantastic. Absolutely love it. 100 hours in, and there's never been a second that I regret the purchase. And I'm always overwhelmed with how well it does everything I ask of it. It was worth every single penny. I would gladly do it again. And everything that I have into this, including all the attachments, even ones you don't see, we got a little over 20,000 into this guy, and that's a lot of money for me. It's the most we've ever paid cash for anything my whole life, and I'd do it again. I would so do it again. If I could have a bigger one, I'd love to. Those 2032 hours and the 2038 hours, oh, I absolutely loved them. I wanted one so bad. But it couldn't quite squeeze through the trees like this one does, so we got this one, and I don't regret it. This has been perfect. Absolutely perfect. So we'll keep logging the miles on it, and yeah, well, I would love to do another 100-hour check-in after here. So until then, have fun. I know I will.